Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Hacker Noon podcast. I'm here with a very special guest today. We have John Roo from Retro Roo Games, the creator of Quest Arrest, which is a cool Game Boy game that was recently, or maybe not so recently, covered on the Metal Jesus Rocks channel on YouTube, which is how I actually discovered it in the first place. How's it going today, John?
It's going awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, life in Canada is colder than I remember, but nothing to complain about, especially with everything going on in the world, right?
Right. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem. Um, just so everyone's clear with our topics today, why don't you give everyone a brief rundown of what Quest Arrest is?
So, Quest Arrest is a Game Boy game that I developed, uh, inspired by, I guess you could say, some games that I enjoyed from my childhood. I played Police Quest. I played Pokemon. Played Super Mario RPG, things like that. Just those kind of games are really what inspired that. It's really like
Mhm.
a child of those three games put together. Um, I didn't think that Quest Arrest would get a physical release. I didn't think that it would be as popular as it is at all. It was just an educational process for me.
Cool.
I just wanted to basically learn how to do game development. I wanted to make a game from start to finish with everything in between, and it just sort of grew into this monster that it's become today. I feel really grateful that it has developed into what it did, but it wasn't intentional, not
So
at
it's
all.
it's one of the first games you've created, or it's actually the first game you've developed from start to finish?
It's actually the first game I developed from start to
Nice.
finish. I created a couple of demos in Unity, just messing around and just trying to understand, and I failed miserably. They were just really terrible, and I didn't finish anything. So I gave it up for a couple of years, and then I came back and I came back with the idea of wanting to finish a game. I didn't really
Nice.
have any ideas on publishing it or anything like that, but it grew into that. So
So what's the basic storyline and gameplay mechanics of the game?
it's really simple. It's pretty much just a town is riddled with crime, and you're a detective that is trying to figure out how to stop that crime.
Mhm.
So it's really simple in terms of story. The gameplay mechanics are a lot like any other turn-based RPG that you would play. A lot of people say it reminds them of Pokemon or
Mhm.
something like that. So that's really what it feels like.
Nice, nice. Before we get more into the technical stuff, could you tell us a bit
Sure.
about your educational background and your career background and how you kind of got started in video game development?
So, it's probably cliche to say like I grew up playing video games and I've been playing video games since I was like 7 or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but that's really the background that I have in gaming. I was in the music industry for a long time doing event coordination, and like oddly, like the world went to pandemic and
Yeah.
all of the events shut down. So there was no opportunities for any jobs within business or within music.
Mhm.
So I kind of got put into a position to where I had to do something else. I had to do
Yeah.
something else with my time. So that's one of the reasons why I really picked up publishing and got into trying to do like actually publishing video games. And I guess it's a sidetrack note, but I am doing publishing for other indie gamers
Ah, I see.
and trying to do things like that with other games that are not only my intellectual properties but other people's games or other companies' games as well. But I don't really have very much of a formal background whenever it comes to video game
Mhm.
like technology or anything like that. I just used YouTube and
Wow.
Google, just to learn certain things. My dad actually held my hand through a lot of stuff. I started programming with like microcontrollers, the
Mhm.
Arduino, and things like that. To try to That's pretty much how I learned how to do coding and stuff like that. So,
How
um,
many years ago did you start learning about coding and programming?
oh, maybe like 3 years ago.
Okay, so not even that long, hey?
No,
Cool.
I'm really new with it, and I'm still learning. Absolutely, it's one of those things where I guess the learning process never ends.
Mhm.
Whenever it comes to development or software development, it's always growing, and new tools come out that help you. And
That's really
so
interesting, man. And like, it's quite a inspiring story, you know, somebody who just picked up coding 3 years ago. You're able to build a game from the ground up, from scratch, ship it physically and digitally, and even get it covered on like these huge YouTube channels, right? In your experience, then, do you think it's kind of possible for anyone and everyone to create a video game, even if you have zero coding experience, or do you recommend like getting a year of coding under your belt first?
I think it's definitely possible. I think it was easier for me because I had learned programming like the concepts and logic behind program before I started jumping into the tools.
Mhm.
But they make things so easy now with the game engines to where they hold your hand so much, and
I see.
it makes it a lot easier for people to just jump in. Like I said, I think it really helps to have like that background in logic and programming, but I don't think it's necessary at all. I think anybody can, and anybody with an inspiration and a dream can jump in.
Yeah. And on that topic of, like doing this a more difficult way or the more easy way, why did you decide to develop it and ship it for the Nintendo Game Boy? Because, perhaps if you had marketed it towards more mainstream and modern consoles, maybe you could have gotten more sales, maybe it would have been an easier time for you. So, what was the decision making behind that process of going with such a retro and niche system?
I thought that it would be easier,
Yeah.
but that was really the idea going in, is like less colors, less
Uh,
buttons, easier to program for. But honestly, at the end of the day, like it's gonna be tough no matter which way you go. I think a lot of the hardest part that people have with any kind of art, whether it be music or video games or whatever you're doing, is finishing something and calling it done and just
mm,
saying, okay, this is going to go out there into the world. And that really was one of the harder parts that I found with the process, was to actually call it done. And it never really feels done. It
mhm,
just doesn't feel good. I never really felt good about putting anything out into the world, and I still feel weird when people tell me that they like my games.
mhm.
It's one of those things where it's just like this uncomfortable feeling. But like I said it before, I've been really lucky to have people enjoy what I create, and for it to have expanded on such like a vast scale. um, but yeah, it's just an odd thing. It really
Yeah,
is.
I'm sure like I'm a writer, so I know that feeling of creating something and not feeling it's done, but you definitely
Right.
should be proud, man, just because the Nintendo Game Boy, it's such an archaic system. You're used to like these game mechanics that are linear and set, but Quest OS is special in the sense that it's kind of an open world game for the Game Boy. Like I guess it's the closest the Game Boy could ever get to an open world game. You can walk
Right.
around the town and talk to anyone you want. You don't really have to go in like a linear fashion from point A to point B. And one thing that I really liked about the fighting mechanic, I guess we'd call it, is once you start to arrest someone, a sequence kind of plays where it's almost like a rhythm based sequence, but it really reminded me of Legend of Dragoon, if you've ever played that.
Okay.
But
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, what was your inspiration behind that specific mechanic? Because that was one of the most interesting things to me.
Paper Mario RPG, this kind of
Mhm.
sort of like action sequence kind of sort of feeling that you could get out of it. It was to take like a turn-based RPG and put a little bit of action to it, you know.
Yeah.
So that was really the idea behind that. It really came from the Mario RPG games, and
Mhm.
the idea that I wanted to. I had a partner that was working with me on the game doing testing for me, and he's just not a fan of RPG games at all.
Mm.
So I wanted to make a game that he would enjoy. That people who don't normally like turn-based RPG games, something that they would enjoy playing, like with adventure elements, and then
Mhm.
a couple of action elements put into it as well. So, but that was really the concept behind that. That is
Yeah.
that I wanted to make something that was generally enjoyed by anybody who could play it.
Yeah, and I think that was a great decision because that's one of the problems with the old school Pokemon games, right? Eventually, you just keep pressing A the whole time, and it gets boring.
Right.
But if
Right.
you have this element, a part of it where you always have to be on your toes, it makes like every battle more interesting.
That was sort of the idea behind it. Yeah, it was, and it's always a new a new combination of
Yeah.
buttons that you're gonna have to press. It's really simple in terms of learning, but it keeps you on your toes. And I really wanted that kind of feeling. I wanted it to feel like something that was easy to learn and just fun to continue to do.
Yeah.
So
And on that note, you were talking earlier about how lots of the game engines kind of hold your hands these days. Since the
absolutely.
game is like very much inspired by Pokemon and other games that kind of already have a set system, did you have to create a lot of that from scratch, or could you actually just take prototypes or code that you already found open sourced on the web and just kind of work off of that?
I took a lot of ideas from other people who had created in the same sort of field,
Mhm.
and I kind of made it my own. But yeah, it was one of those things where uh, I was trying to take what was already done and make it creative, make it unique in its own way, and that on its own is kind of a challenge to do. But yeah, there was a lot of tools that were already out there and a lot of things that were already out there that helped me along the way, and I just tried to make it into something that was original, that felt original whenever you played it. But a lot of the things that I use are um, are definitely old uh, technology. It's nothing extremely crazy or creative. It's stuff that other people can still use now if they wanted to create in their games. A lot of it was me having my hand held and trying to make something creative out of something that was already established.
For
So
sure. And what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in that process of trying to make something creative, in such a market that some people would even call saturated? Even the retro game market is getting more and more saturated these days, I'd say. What were the toughest challenges you faced throughout this project?
toughest challenges, I would say, just trying to create something fun with such a simplistic set of tools and such a simplistic environment, I guess, to create something that's unique, that hasn't been seen or played. And one of the big things that I played off of story wise was the fact that I couldn't find any other Game Boy games that had the level of profanity and vulgarness that my game
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
It was, I was like, okay, what can I do that other Game Boy games don't have? And a lot of them are bubbly or they're kids games, and that's really like I knew the audience that I was going for was people who are like my age. I'm
Yeah.
31, so it's like people who are older. They're grown up. It's not going to be kids that are going to be playing this. It's going to be
Yeah.
mostly adults. So I try to think of what is it that is going to make this unique to anything else that's on the system. And
Mhm.
I think adding that vulgarity and
Yeah.
profanity and violence to a Game Boy game with all these cute characters was something that stood out.
Yeah. When you think back to the creation phase, the marketing phase, and even like the publishing and shipping phase, we do get some indie game developers on HackerNoon writing. So I'm wondering if like you can think of any major moments where you thought, oh, I just wish I had known this before I started, and you can kind of save future indie game developers from making some of the same mistakes you may have made during this process.
Things that I wish I would have known before I started. That's a tough one. There's a lot of things that I wish that I would have known. Um, I, I have to think about it for a second.
No
But
worries. If you
as
had
far
done,
as
if you would have restarted from the beginning, would you still have shipped it on the Nintendo Game Boy and you would have done everything the exact same?
I would have done it the exact same because I feel extremely lucky to have the outcome that it did have. It's like you said, I could have made it for other systems, for modern systems, and maybe gotten more sales, or maybe got more outreach. But I think it was just a really grand slam place for me to start, to get my feet wet whenever it comes to game development.
Mhm.
I feel like it was the perfect place to begin. Um, I don't
Mhm.
think I would do anything different. If the publishing was kind of hard, it was kind of because I'm working with multiple different companies to
Mhm.
actually publish it. So that was kind of difficult to get into and to understand.
Who are
That's
you
why
working with to publish it?
I'm sorry.
Who are you working with to publish it that helped you get it
I'm doing
packaged and
uh,
shipped?
doing the publishing myself, but I'm working with a couple of different manufacturers to create the different pieces of like the boxes or the chips themselves,
Okay, I
the
think
labels.
if you don't mind, that's a very interesting point because,
Sure.
some game developers might want to create physical copies of their games, be it retro or more modern. What is kind
Right.
of the process of that? Well, where do you have to get these pieces from? Is there a specific company that does everything, or you have to get different companies for each different part of it?
That was just it. That was the problem. That's why I am offering publishing to other game developers, is because it was so difficult to go piece by piece to get everything put together. What I did start out with was just a flasher, like
Mhm,
a USB little PCB kind of thing that you plug into a Game Boy game into, and
mhm.
some software that they had online. I think the company was called Inside Gadgets. You
Okay.
just buy this $40 little flasher tool, and then use reproduction carts, but to actually get them made on a mass scale was a
Mhm.
completely different process. It was hectic. It's still hectic. It's something that if I could warn anybody going into, is definitely a difficult process to do. That's why, like I said, I don't mind offering publishing, through my company, and helping gamers out, whether they want to make, one copy of their game or 1,000 copies of their
Mhm.
game to sell towards a market.
Who are
Same.
these who are these companies that are still making Game Boy cartridges? Like, is are these based in China? Are they based in the US?
They're based in China. Yeah, it's definitely Chinese companies. There are other companies, I think, in Australia,
Mhm.
the UK, and Canada, that do this kind of thing. But I forgot what they're called. I forgot the names of
Yeah.
the companies. The companies that I work with, they don't even particularly do this kind of thing. It
Mhm.
was like me reaching out just kind of on a limb, like, hey, is this something you can do? I know
Mhm.
you guys work with this kind of thing. Is this something that you can maybe work on with me? That's really what made it difficult, was just trying to reach out to these people and be like, I know this is from 1992, but
Yeah.
can you make this happen for me? And eventually I fell upon some companies that were like, sure, we can do this for you.
That's great. So now you're kind of trying to offer that same service to other publishers just so they don't have to find all these individual companies themselves.
Exactly. Like, I can link them with just one specific piece, or if they wanted to actually have their game fully taken care of. I would even go as far as to offer, helping them with the financial side of it, if they really needed it, and I felt like their game was a game that could make them money, and that could pay back the actual finances that
Mhm.
I put up front for them. But yeah, I would even go as far as helping them with that aspect of it. I definitely want to see more games get published and more physicals get put into the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be Game Boy games. It could be any type of game. I've already gone down the avenues that you would have to take to get your game physically made whenever it comes to every
Mhm.
piece of it. So I definitely want to see more game developers be able to get physical copies. Me myself, I'm a collector. I have a big shelf of games
Mhm.
that I want, that I have, and it's just really cool to see other indie
Yeah.
games or come out with physical copies. It's just a really neat thing, I think.
Yeah. With a company called the Retro Room, I kind of assumed that you were a collector yourself.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
talking about how these days actually retro has seen a boom. I don't know how long we're going to see this last, but you see these companies like limited run games coming out with specific releases that are meant to be limited. And I don't know how active you are in the retro community, but there's a lot of people that kind of hate the way that the retro gaming scene has gone with these companies that are purposefully making a limited number of games for the purpose of making sure these are rare and will be worth more money later. And it's not
Mhm.
just limited run. Play Asia does the same thing, and there's other companies that are more and more of these I kind of see like month after month. What do you think about this certain situation we're in and these companies that are engaging in this side of the retro game market?
It's interesting that they do that. That it's a good way to make money. They're just businessmen making money. And I understand that completely. I think my company is going to try to battle that kind of thing. I'm trying to take old games that maybe aren't being published anymore and republishing those old games for physical copy. The thing that it's really hard to get in touch with some of the owners of these companies who the companies might have been taken over by another big company, or and I'm still really new and fresh within that market, but I'm trying to kind of almost battle that concept of them taking something and making it so rare. I want to take something that's not being published anymore and re-release it almost exactly the way that it was released back then, ultimately making it easier for collectors to find it, and bringing down the price of some of those games. It's just it's one of those things where I understand why they do it. It's easy market to make money in, and I get that, but I definitely want to kind of combat that with my own sort of publishing in the future, if I can really get into that concept.
Yeah, I don't want you to go into any specifics of it, but for the sales of your game in particular, was it way beyond what you were expecting when you started? Was it about what you had expected, or what are your thoughts there?
Whenever I first pressed physical copies of the game, I did 100 of them, and I thought I might sell 20 or something like that, but they sold out within 12 hours or something like that. It was, all of them were gone. So it really exceeded my expectations whenever it came to that. I made the game really inexpensive in comparison to all of my competitors. All of them are selling them for $40, $50, $60. And I made mine $35. I was like, I'm not really that concerned with getting rich off of this or anything like that. I don't think I'm going to, So it really exceeded my expectations, though. I did not expect to.
Well, the card only copy is only $15. It's not even.
Yeah. I tried to make it as affordable to the consumer as possible, and I really just wanted to get the game out there. It was my first rodeo whenever it comes to creating a full game, period, much less like publishing a physical game. I've made a couple of games since then, but that being my first one, I was extremely surprised at the outcome of it. It actually was inspirational. It made me want to continue developing games and make bigger, better games,
So you just said you've been creating games since then. Do you have any like new more like solidified projects in the works that you want to tell us about, or is everything kind of under wraps right now?
I am working on a Game Boy game, another Game Boy game called Gelatinous. It's a completely different take, completely different concept. It's a platformer, action adventure platformer kind of game. So I'm definitely working on that. That's already out there in the public. I did a couple of like small games like that. I felt for fun, for learning educational processes. I did like a pet the dog simulator where it was like FMV style, like 90s FMV video style pet the dog simulator. And I did a fan game. I did like a paper Legend of Zelda.
Okay.
And both of those ended up being like also wildly successful whenever it comes to viewership and downloads. So I got really lucky with that. But yeah, the next couple of games that I'm working on, the original concepts that I'm going to sell, one that I can talk about is Gelatinous, and that's definitely going to be a lot of fun. I think people are going to enjoy it. It's really difficult game. It's like a Dark Souls for Game Boy, but it's a platformer game, and I think people are going to really enjoy it.
And again, are you creating that all on your own, or do you have more people coming in this time?
This time I have other people who are helping, so it's bigger and better, and it's just going to be a much more large project. It's already like 5 times the size of Quester S, so it's already a pretty large game, and we're like, I want to say like 75% done with development at this point, and it's just really looking like a quite a larger game.
Great.
It really helps to have those people involved, like doing some art stuff and doing other aspects of it, and me just not handling it on my own. That was really like a difficult thing. It's hard to make decisions as a game developer to say this needs to go this way or this needs to go that way. makes it a lot easier whenever you have a business partner and they're just like, okay, let's do this, and you're like, okay, fine, let's do it that way. That's good,
For sure. Talking about the business side, I'm a part
Sure.
of a few indie game groups on Facebook, and a lot of one topic that is kind of prevalent in every group is people aren't, they're smart with the coding, they're great at actually making a good product, but most of these people are engineers and they have no experience marketing or building a community. So as you said, QuestRS was it got way more big than you ever thought it could. And I was wondering if you could give some of the people listening perhaps some advice on the marketing side and how you got it to get this big.
I think a lot of the experience that I had in the music industry helped with that. Creating these publicity stunts of sorts, or like feeding people things that they want to see rather than what I want them to see. You
Mm,
know, I think that was like a really important concept for me to understand, is that I want somebody to see, I want them to look at my game, look at me, but that might not be exactly what they want to see or what they're going to be receptive towards.
mhm.
So I think a lot of it was me showing them things that they want to see, rather than what I wanted them to see. And I would sprinkle in things I wanted them to see, um, at the same time. So,
And
but go
where
ahead.
where would you be showing them these like teasers that you thought they'd want to see? Like what platforms did you use to get the word out there?
I used Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Those were like my most prevalent platforms that I was really pushing content out. But like I said, I was pushing out more than just my own games. I was
Mhm,
like talking about just retro gaming in general and just getting
mhm.
involved in the community. Excuse me,
Always.
getting involved in the community, just in general, and talking about retro games that everybody enjoys.
Mhm,
And things that I grew up enjoying and that I felt like other people enjoyed too, like just retro concepts in general, like
mhm,
Blockbuster or
mhm.
things like that. So
Interesting.
I think getting involved in that community was like the one of the bigger aspects that helped push my game development career along.
I
Was
see. So you did a lot of like 100% word of mouth, like you talking one to one to many different groups online, and you did kind of the marketing like straight in there all on your own. You didn't go through any other company or any other like shady
right.
marketing business. You did this all kind of like authentic, organic creation of buzz around your own product.
Yeah, the way that I did it was just, I didn't even have a product at first. I was just trying to, like, I remember speaking with my girlfriend at the time, like, about how I just didn't have anybody to talk retro gaming with in real life. It was like I had this hole in my heart. I was like, I really want to talk to somebody about retro games, and she didn't want to talk about them. Nobody in my real life, none of my real
Yeah.
life friends were like really into that kind of thing. It was just too deep into the nerd realm for them. They were into new games or not gaming at all.
Yeah.
But I was really searching for like that void of just being able to talk about old stuff that made me feel good. And I use social media to fill that void.
Mhm.
And I think in that process, I picked up game development again, and I already grown sort of an audience of people that I want to call them all friends, because that's what we are. I grew like these friends that were into the same things that I'm into in terms of retro content. So
Nice.
that really helped with the marketing, definitely.
Cool. Cool. So before we go here, John, do you have any last parting words of advice for any fellow aspiring indie game devs that may be listening to this podcast?
I definitely want to say, like you're gonna have that analysis paralysis. That concept that, like, oh, this isn't good enough. Like, I feel like that comes with the territory, and it never feels like it's good enough. It's really like an issue for me personally, is that I didn't feel like anything that I was making was going to be good enough. Or even still, like with gelatinous, for example, like, oh, I just don't feel like it's ready. It's not,
Mhm.
prepared enough. Like, it could be better here or there. But if you sit there and spend 15 years on a game, then people might not ever see it, and you might miss your opportunity. So um, I feel like a good piece of advice is to give yourself maybe even a cutoff date. That's what I did with Quest Arrest. I was like, hey, I can keep working on this game for years, or I can just cut it off at this specific time and put it out there and just hope for the best and move on to the next thing. You know, so I think that's a really big piece of advice. Another piece of advice that I can give is don't try to sell yourself. Just make friends in the community and make friends with other developers and designers and other people who YouTubers, other people who are just interested in the same concepts that you're interested in. Those people who are your friends, they're going to share your stuff. They're going to, you know, they're going to be receptive towards your stuff. They're going to play your game, you know, and they're going to also be honest with you about how they feel about it. They're going to be like, oh, this could have been better. Or, you know, they're going to give you more honest advice. So I think like a lot of game developers try to sell themselves immediately, and that's a problem. But yeah, that's some advice that I think I could give.
And where can people find Quest Arrest and buy a copy for themselves today?
TheRetroRoomGames.com. It's definitely
Nice.
available there. You can, it's big store thing. There's all kinds of merch, and you can get a physical copy in the box complete or just the cart.
And is that where you're gonna ship Gelatinous as well?
Yeah. There's another website that is gonna host it as well, but I'll definitely be hosting it there. I think we have gelatinousgame.com or something like that.
Nice. And where can people find you on social media? What are your handles?
On Twitter, it's the Retro Room Roo. On Facebook, it's the Retro Room or Retro Room Roo. On Instagram, it's something along the lines of the Retro Room Roo. But yeah, you can definitely find me. Probably just searching the Retro Room and seeing, like, I have a logo that's pretty consistent. So if you find me on one platform, then you'll find me on the other ones. In my bios, usually I put like Quest Arrest something, you know, or another.
All right. Well, no worries. We'll make sure to have all of the links to your social media in the show notes below. And
I really
thanks.
appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks very much for joining us today, John. This was very interesting, and I'm having fun with the game so far. I'm about an hour in, and I
Nice.
hope we can talk again once your next game is released.
Oh, I love that. That's great. I really appreciate you having me on. I thank you so much.
Thanks for watching another episode of the HackerNoon Gaming Podcast. Please be sure to follow John Roo on Twitter at RetroRoomRoo, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more gaming podcasts. Thanks, and see you next time.